Rapid train number 5418 is behind schedule just outside Osaka, Japan. The driver is trying to make up lost time.
電車は予定より少々遅れております。次は尼崎です。
The train enters a curve at 116 kilometers an hour, 46 kilometers over the speed limit. Seconds later, it's airborne. Monday, the tail end of rush hour. For more than 650 passengers aboard rapid train number 5418, the morning commute ends in disaster. The train derails at more than 100 kilometers per hour and smashes into an apartment building in Amagasaki, 2 stations short of Osaka. It's hard to believe that anyone inside the first 2 carriages could have survived. But this man has. Shortly after the crash, Kyochi Yoshida, a 39-year-old video engineer, regains consciousness.
目が覚めた時は、もう世界がなんか。
When I woke up, the world in front of my eyes was foggy. It could be because I wasn't fully conscious.
まあその場所閉じ込められてた僕は閉じ込められた。
I couldn't recognize the place I was trapped in. I mean, I saw a concrete ceiling above the window of the train, and I thought, what am I doing here? I couldn't recognize the situation. But I knew I was in a dangerous place.
Yoshida was traveling in the lead carriage, which hit the apartment building with such force that it's now buried deep inside the basement parking garage. The first rescuers arrive at 9:24 a.m., just 6 minutes after the crash. Nothing could have prepared them for what they see inside the wreckage. Kyochi Yoshida remembers the moments just before the crash. He was traveling to his work at a local TV station when the train suddenly shifted violently.
I was imagining the train would fall on its side. And while I was thinking about it, it actually started to happen. I was thrown to my right, toward the front of the train. Then I realized that I was facing backwards. I could see down toward the rear part of the train, and while I was falling, I was losing consciousness.
All around him, underneath him, are the bodies of strangers. Then he spots something familiar lying right on top of him.
And then when I looked at my chest, there was my laptop computer I'd been using just minutes before, hanging nicely right there in front of me.
Yoshida believes that the gap between the laptop and his chest may have saved his life, giving him just enough space to keep breathing. The news of Japan's worst rail disaster since 1963 hits the airwaves within minutes of the crash. Momoko Suzuki is at work when the news breaks. She's horrified by the report of numerous casualties, especially since her husband and her daughter Junko often ride that train.
この事故によって列車の1両目は完全に大破。しかしながら奇跡的にもその車両には生存者がいました。現在のところ事故での死者は2、30人と確認されています。
The rescuers soon realize that 20 to 30 dead is an optimistic prediction. In the first hour alone, they discovered dozens of bodies, most of them in the two front carriages. Hundreds of injured are taken to nearby hospitals, and many are still trapped in the depths of the wreckage. Kyochi Yoshida has injuries from head to foot. A broken pelvis, broken ribs, severe whiplash. Even more serious, his legs are trapped in the wreckage. They're squeezed to the point where there's a danger of getting crush syndrome, a deadly condition that can set in as early as half an hour after entrapment. It's critical that he gets medical treatment before his legs are released, or his vital organs could shut down. Saisakai Shiga Hospital is 70 kilometers from the crash site, home base for a remarkable medical specialist, Dr. Takanobu Hase. He and his team are prepared to treat conditions such as crush syndrome. They work right at the crash site while patients are still trapped.
As much as we have room for it. It's good to prevent hypovolemic shock as well. Make sure we have enough.
His second in command, Dr. Shinji Akatomi, has heard that there are already many rescuers at the site. Even so, he knows this kind of disaster calls for experts who know how to work in confined spaces. The key is to get to the crash site in time.
Confined space medicine いわゆる瓦礫の下の医療が必要な救助者がいる。
I believe that the rescuers would need us, that we'd be able to help them.
Meanwhile, Momoko Suzuki tries to find out if any family members were on board train number 5418.
Checking to see that Masashi is in the office. I'm watching the news about the car.
I worried if my husband had made it to work. I called his office and they told me he's in. I was relieved. But then I thought, maybe Junko is on that train.
Momoko's daughter Junko is a 30-year-old artist. She takes this train 5 times a week to get to a design course at a nearby technical school. Momoko calls Junko's mobile phone. She prays it will be answered. The team from Saisakai Shiga Hospital races the 70 kilometers to the crash site. Dr. Takanobu Hase has years of experience in emergency medicine. The massive Kobe earthquake of 1995 was a turning point in his career. Hase was shocked to see many people die in the days following the quake because they didn't receive on-site treatment for crush syndrome. Ever since then, he's taken a special interest in confined space medicine. The team uses this time to mentally prepare themselves for the tasks that lie ahead. Dr. Hase reminds his team to give the trapped passengers fluid resuscitation before they are released. He reminds them if they get it wrong, people will die.
Before they are released. Okay?
A young intern, Hiroaki Nagata, has joined the team. He's never set foot on a disaster site before.
私はその現場が初めてでしたので
It was my first time, so I was just going to do exactly as the senior doctors ordered. At the time, I had no idea what I could do for anyone. I was very nervous. Very nervous.
The senior doctors offer encouragement.
永田先生に伝えたかったことは
I told Dr. Nagata that at the disaster site everybody will be agitated and rushing around. I said that we have to prepare ourselves to be calm. That's what I told him.
At the crash site, passengers are still trapped in the wreckage of the first two carriages. The rescuers run out of stretchers to move the wounded. A few survivors are trapped so deep in the rubble that the rescuers won't even discover them for several hours. One of them is a 19-year-old student who had been standing at the front of carriage number 1. The crash hurled him forward into the driver's cabin. The young man is trapped alongside the dead driver, pinned from the waist down. His limbs are under terrible pressure. He's conscious enough to make contact with his family. He tells them that he may not live long enough to be rescued.
Don't give up. Just hold on. Hang in there.
Further back in carriage number 1, Kyochi Yoshida fights his fear and pain by encouraging the person next to him.
I was holding somebody's hand for quite some time. My mental state was not normal. It took a long time to realize that the person whose hand I was holding had already passed away.
This morning, Yoshida changed his routine. Instead of riding at the back of the train as he normally did, he sat in the very front carriage. Car number 1 is the most mangled of the train's 7 carriages.
It was really, really painful. I was so preoccupied by the pain that there was no room left to think about, how am I going to survive?
Momoko Suzuki calls other family members to see if they have heard from Junko.
But There's no answer.
She learns that Junko was in touch with her sister earlier that morning.
The 25日の朝は私の方が出勤時間が早いので、その時にこんなことはめったにないんですけども、純子が
That day the accident happened, on the 25th, I had to leave home before Junko. I usually leave home at 7:20.
行ってらっしゃいって言われたんで、はい、行ってきます。
It had never happened before, but Junko got up and came downstairs, still in pajamas, and she said goodbye, and she said goodbye again. I was wearing shoes already, and I remember I was wondering, why is she saying goodbye twice today? That was the only conversation we had that morning.
それが純子と朝の会話っていうんですか、それだけですね。連休があって。
There was a long weekend approaching, so my daughters had been exchanging text messages about having some dinner party. They were exchanging messages at the time, and suddenly it was cut off. It made me realize she was most probably on that train, and I started to feel very panicky.
By now, emergency workers have ferried more than 400 injured passengers to hospital. At the disaster site, they are now concentrating on body recovery. After fighting traffic and roadblocks, Dr. Hase's team finally arrives. They hope they haven't arrived too late.
The first thing I saw was a horrendous sight. This huge train bent into a V shape, hanging from the apartment building. It was a much bigger accident than we'd imagined.
As they approach the wreckage, team members check victims for vital signs. All are dead. But Hase's team know from experience that there might still be survivors inside.
"4 hours had already passed since the accident, but things were still chaotic. If anyone was still trapped inside, they'd need confined space medicine. Also, rescuers might have been injured in secondary accidents. That's what I had in mind when we arrived at the site.
Inside carriage number 1, emergency workers have removed some of the bodies. But they cannot release Yoshida. Crush syndrome is now a real risk. When muscles are under intense pressure, the damaged cells disintegrate. If the pressure is released, potassium and a protein called myoglobin flood through the bloodstream. Elevated myoglobin levels can cause acute kidney failure, and increased potassium concentration can lead to cardiac arrest. Without Dr. Hase's help, Yoshida could die.
Doctor! We need a doctor!
As Dr. Hase's team enters the destroyed parking garage, they are stunned by the destruction around them.
The first carriage of the train was crushed into the parking space of the apartment building. We went in there. I remember it was very hot and smelled of gas, because fuel was leaking from the cars in the parking space. Reinforcement steel was exposed, and there was shattered glass everywhere. Iron frames were bent and the edges were as sharp as knives. I felt it was very dangerous as soon as I entered. It looked like all those things could fall on you at any time. Also, evaporated gasoline could catch fire and explode at any moment.
Inside the demolished car park, there is not enough oxygen and too much carbon monoxide, a toxic combination. In this confined space, rescuers also risk contamination and infection from the blood and other body fluids of the victims. The temperature inside the wreckage has hit 40 degrees Celsius. But Dr. Hase and his team persist, carefully checking vital signs of each body in their path. Finally, Dr. Hase comes face to face with Kyochi Yoshida.
I recognized him as a doctor the moment I saw him. And I thought, oh, the doctor has arrived. He was providing triage very prudently, taking so much time to make sure. I'd never met a single doctor who first introduced himself, so I was very surprised, and at the same time, I was deeply moved by it.
Dr. Hase realizes Yoshida's leg is trapped and under great pressure.
When Dr. Hase approached Mr. Yoshida, he assessed what kind of situation Yoshida was in. His legs were trapped, and he was starting to feel numb. Dr. Hase was thinking about crush syndrome.
Hase knows that Kyochi Yoshida needs to be put on an intravenous drip right away. But Yoshida is confused by pain, shock, and stress, so he doesn't understand why he needs this kind of treatment. The doctor explains that intravenous fluids will help prevent crush syndrome and possibly save Yoshida's life.
He first told me something like, I am cutting your clothes. Even though my clothes at the time were all crumpled up and torn, he excused himself first before using the scissors. And I was so touched by how polite he was.
The intravenous fluids help flush out the myoglobin and potassium that will otherwise flood into the bloodstream as soon as his leg is released. The treatment will help prevent kidney and heart failure. Fluid resuscitation also reduces the possibility that he will go into shock once released. Momoko Suzuki has called all the local hospitals. Her daughter Junko isn't at any of them.
Type B blood type.
Fearing the worst, she tries the last place any parent wants to visit.
Have you seen anyone like that here?
I called many hospitals, but I couldn't get information about Junko from any of them. So I realized there's a possibility that Junko is already dead and at the morgue. We were not allowed to go into the actual morgue to see the bodies. We had to wait in a room, and if there was a positive identification, then we could go into the morgue. There were Polaroid photos of the dead people that I had to go through to check if Junko was among them.
At the crash site, rescuers are still finding victims. More than 5 hours after the accident, they discover a young woman deep inside carriage number 2 who matches Momoko's description of her daughter Junko. Dr. Hase's intravenous treatment has dramatically increased Yoshida's chances of survival. But 5 hours after the crash, his left leg still remains completely trapped.
And I was thinking, if the inside of my body was damaged, drinking water could cause problems. But I couldn't stand it, so I took some water. And also, it was unbelievably humid, so I asked them to pour the water from their bottles over my head.
The pain is excruciating, but it will now be less risky to release him from the wreckage.
Although there was no guarantee that my left leg could be pulled out of the rubble, I felt relieved somehow. The left leg was so hard to pull out that someone, I think it was the leader of the rescue team, said, if this situation doesn't change, it's not looking good.
The rescuers are having a hard time figuring out which foot is Yoshida's. Tangled in the mountain of rubble with his left leg are the limbs of dead bodies.
They asked me many times, is this it? Is this it? While they were tapping shoes. But I couldn't feel anything. I actually thought that my shoe was being tapped, but that my foot might be partially dead. I was worried.
Yoshida wants to call his family, but can't find his phone.
So I put my hand in my pocket, and there was no phone. Then I realized that I was holding the phone in my left hand at the moment of the accident, and that it must have been thrown somewhere.
じゃあまあレスキューの方に助けてもらってる間に、ちょっと電話
I thought about asking the rescuers to lend me their phone, but it didn't seem that my left leg was going to be released.
が解放される感じはもうなくてもう
It occurred to me to call my family, to let them hear my voice and let them know I was still alive. But then I also thought that if I didn't pull through, they might be devastated. So I decided to call them after I was released.
Yes! Yes!
After 10 minutes, the rescuers have finally identified Yoshida's foot. As his leg is released from the crushing pressure, Yoshida experiences a strange sensation.
とにかくなんか足がじんじ
I felt a strong pounding in my leg. The condition was such that I didn't even know if the information from the tip of my foot would be going from here or come back to here. I couldn't actually feel whether my leg had been released or not.
I'm gonna roll him over gently.
Blood rushes into his left leg, which increases the risk that Yoshida will go into shock. Meanwhile, other rescuers working in a different part of the wreckage have finally managed to free Junko Suzuki. They ease her out of the rubble of carriage number 2 and bring her motionless body to Dr. Akitomi. He checks for any signs of life.
そしたら純子さんがこう
Miss Junko arrived in front of me. I was surprised because she was covered in oil and I couldn't tell whether she was breathing or whether her heart was beating. I opened her mouth a bit and found it was filled with tiny pieces of glass. I did not have any equipment with me. I just had 2 ballpoint pens. I put one of them between her tightly closed teeth and forced her mouth open. Then, using the other pen, I removed the glass from her mouth.
Dr. Akitomi tries to get any kind of response from Junko. His efforts fail. He realizes she's in a coma.
Her level of consciousness was very low, and there was the possibility of head injury. Also, her blood pressure was very weak.
Junko is also in shock because there isn't enough blood and oxygen flowing to her brain, heart, kidneys, and liver. So these organs are in danger of shutting down. Dr. Hase and Dr. Akitomi ride in the ambulance with Junko, fighting to keep her alive.
This could be touch and go. Really hanging in. She stopped breathing.
Her consciousness level dropped dramatically. It was a bad situation. Dr. Hase quickly gave her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and I went to get a breathing aid.
Okay. Okay. Got it from here. All right.
僕にとってハセ先生というのは本当に尊敬する。
Dr. Hase was someone I really respected, He was very understanding. And he was my mentor.
Dr. Hase manages to revive Junko. Her condition is so critical that her only hope is an airlift to hospital. Dr. Akitomi and Dr. Hase decide they must take the journey with her. As rescuers lift Yoshida out of his prison and into the light of day, he's overcome by a flood of conflicting emotions.
I was moved, not just because my legs were released, but also because the rescue people were working so hard. It took 5 hours and I was finally taken outside. I was so grateful to my rescuers that I ended up having tears in my eyes. I actually felt like staying there a little bit longer. That's how much we bonded in that small space. It was a real, special atmosphere.
Thank you so much.
It was really cold, and I started to have a chill.
Yoshida is suffering from shock. There is also still a chance of crush syndrome. Even though he was treated on site, doctors will have to watch closely for signs of kidney problems in the next few days. By late afternoon, many rescuers have left the accident site, certain that there are no more survivors. But Dr. Hase's team isn't so sure. After they've delivered Junko to hospital, they return to the wreckage.
I'd heard that in other countries, there have been quite a few cases where people were rescued 24 hours, even 48 hours later. I was not sure that any survivors would still be trapped, but I wanted to help in case someone was found alive.
Just after 4 p.m., rescuers hear several voices from the very front of carriage number 1. Among them is the 19-year-old student whose lower body is pinned beside the lifeless driver. He feels pressure in his chest. Breathing is difficult.
Both legs were trapped. He couldn't feel anything, couldn't move his legs at all. When I heard that, I knew there was a chance he would have crush syndrome, that if he did not get treatment for it, he may not survive.
The team's intern, Dr. Hiroaki Nagata, works his way toward the driver's demolished cabin.
It was a very small space. The train was crushed in like that, and there were a lot of dead people, dead bodies. It's not a nice way of saying it, but they looked like bats hanging down.
Dr. Nagata prepares to treat the young man for crush syndrome and encourages him to hang on for a little longer.
そうですね、もうあかんわ言って弱気な発言をされてる時もありましたね。言い方悪いですけど、アホか言うて。
He actually sometimes said I might just give up. When he said that, I told him, don't be a fool. That rescuers are trying to get to him. So until they reach you, until they save you, you can't give up. That's what I told him.
そしたら助かるし、いうことを喋りましたね。非常にやりにくかったです。やりにくいけど必要なので、やらなければならないという状況でした。そういう。
It was a very awkward way to be giving treatment. I knew that if I failed to give him IV fluid, he was going to die. So I did my best.
You're gonna make it. It's okay.
Junko's mother has found out that there's a badly injured survivor in Osaka General Hospital who could be Junko.
Are there braces?
I felt my search is over. I have found her.
Junko is still breathing, but only just. Her doctor estimates that her chance of survival is a mere 1%.
The doctor told me that Junko was brought here by helicopter and that there was an emergency operation in her stomach area that they had to do without permission in order to save her life.
Junko has suffered a severe blow to the head. Her brain tissue swelled, creating great pressure inside her skull. This pressure compromises blood flow and oxygen that nourishes the brain. After hours in this condition, it's very likely any damage could be permanent.
一応手術して処置は一応全部するだけのことは処置はしましたから、あとは
They'd done all they could. The doctor told me that we'd have to see what happened over the next 3 days, that there could be brain damage.
Dr. Hase's team works into the night to help save the lives of several remaining trapped passengers. All are suffering from crush syndrome and need on-site treatment. The young man from the driver's cabin is the last survivor pulled out alive, 22 hours after the crash. In all, 107 passengers died in the crash. 555 have been injured, many severely. Kyochi Yoshida's injuries are so serious that he stays in the hospital for more than 2 months. He is deeply moved by the team that volunteered and traveled 70 kilometers to save his life.
If I didn't get treatment, I might have died or ended up on a kidney machine. If I'd been rescued before Dr. Hase treated me, it's likely I would have ended up with crush syndrome. It took 5 hours to rescue me. But that means I was treated by Dr. Hase. There was luck in a very unlucky situation.
He wrote a book about his life and death experience on train number 5418.
It's good of you to stay with me. It's a long day for you.
After the accident, Junko Suzuki lies in a coma for many months. Her family keeps a constant vigil at her bedside.
I couldn't accept the fact that she's going to die. I always had it in my mind that she will be okay, and she will regain consciousness.
One day, 6 months after the accident, Junko finally wakes up.
Oh, Junko. Junko, you're awake. Mom here. Junko. Oh, I don't believe it.
I was taking care of Junko all the time. I was so happy that I was her mother when she called my name. The nurses at the hospital heard her voice with me. They were actually crying. They were so happy for me.
Oh, yes, Junko.
Junko did suffer some brain damage, but after intensive rehabilitation, she is back home with her family. She's become something of a national hero. Support has poured in from across Japan.
I was really relieved that I was alive.
鈴木純子さんが5ヶ月ぶりに意識戻ったっていうことは、もう本当に奇跡。
It was a miracle that Junko Suzuki regained her consciousness. A series of miracles.
Dr. Akatomi often goes to visit Junko and her family, even though he now works 3 hours away in Tokyo. Junko's life changed forever the day train number 5418 went off the rails. But she hasn't lost her artistic dreams.
I've got good eyesight, and I've got capable hands, so I would like to find some kind of job using my hands. I want to be an illustrator, or something like that.
She was my daughter. But for 30 years, we'd never really been that close. I've been given the chance to raise my daughter again. We can actually start again. I feel that. I've started to notice what love really means.
A flash flood trapped 7 French cavers 100 meters underground. As the water rises, it forces the men up against the cave roof. There is no escape. In southern France, a freak storm turns a weekend caving adventure into a life and death struggle. 7 men scramble into their life rafts and wait helplessly as the floodwaters force them relentlessly upward. The air pocket that's keeping them alive is shrinking. If the water keeps rising, it will crush them into the cave's ceiling and drown them. Nicolas Violande is on his first overnight caving expedition. It is a terrifying initiation.
I was 19 years old at the time. Why, at the beginning of my life, am I going to die here?
Nicolas is the youngest member of the team. He and 6 more experienced cavers have been planning this expedition for months. All of them are from the nearby town of Grammat. They all share one passion: exploring the planet's underground frontiers. The Viterel cave system is right in their backyard. It stretches for 14 kilometers beneath the fields and forests around Grammat. It's a giant subterranean network of caverns, with an underground river and caves up to 40 meters tall. There's only one entrance. This is how Nicolas and the others have descended into Viterel. The entry point is a narrow, 40-meter deep well that connects with the underground river. At the start of the expedition, the river is just ankle deep in most sections. In other areas, they need rafts to make their way through the deeper water.
Our goal was to follow the underground river and check out parts of the cave that hadn't been explored in 15 or 20 years.
2 days into their expedition, a freak wave of violent thunderstorms sweeps through the region. Dumping 62 millimeters of rain in just 12 hours. The underground river rises quickly, flooding the cave and blocking the cavers' only escape route. Nicolas and the 6 other cavers have been trapped for most of the day. They huddle together just 1.5 meters from the roof of the cave.
There were no sounds anymore, no noises. It was a silent lake that was rising little by little.
Listen, guys.
Nicolas tries to boost the group's morale. He tells his friend that he'll buy them all a car if they get out alive. He's only half serious.
We were supposed to meet up with another group of cavers the next day. So once the water rose, we knew our families would sound the alarm and contact the rescuers.
300 kilometers away in another cave system, Bernard Tort leads a rescue training exercise. Bernard is a world-renowned caver with nearly 2 decades of experience. Now his expertise is urgently needed in France's biggest ever cave rescue attempt.
Hello? On reçoit un nouvel appel nous annonçant qu'il
We got a phone call that there was a group of 7 people trapped in the Vitarelle.
On apprend l'ampleur de la cavité.
It's a huge cave system, and the flow of the river there gets incredibly powerful when there are massive floods. It becomes really dangerous. So we took this call very seriously.
On a peut-être une situation dramatique avec nos 7 rescapés.
We knew we had a potentially tragic situation on our hands.
Dans une situation très très grave.
For the men trapped in their life rafts, the hours pass slowly and painfully. At 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, the water is bone-chillingly cold.
We felt abandoned. We asked, why did this happen to us?
The only thing keeping them alive is a pressurized pocket of air between the water and the top of the cavern. The men know their situation is precarious. Any change in the pressure inside the cave could make the water rise suddenly.
I was asking myself, will I have enough air to breathe? It was either we get out, or we will be left to die.
The men must use their lamps sparingly. The lamps burn a flammable gas to make light, and this process consumes precious oxygen. With every breath, they rob the tiny air pocket of its life-saving oxygen. And every time they exhale, they fill the air chamber with increasing amounts of deadly carbon dioxide. As carbon dioxide levels accumulate in the body, breathing accelerates, heart rate increases, tissue fluids become acidic. Extremely high levels of CO2 can cause respiratory paralysis, convulsions, coma, even death. Computer technician Philippe Verger is the team's technical expert. He uses an altimeter to check the air pressure in the bubble. He knows that as long as the pressure remains stable, the water will not rise or drop suddenly. Philippe reports that the pressure is high and holding for the moment. But any change in another part of the river could eliminate their safe haven in seconds. In the town of Grama, family and friends of the cavers are worried. They fear that the torrential rains have turned the Vitarelle cave system into a death trap. Rescuers set up headquarters on a military base above the cave system. Rescue groups from across the country converge on the small town. But because the entrance well is flooded, they are unable to get down in the caves. One of the key rescuers to arrive on the scene is Guy Barriviera.
My feeling is that it might be stuck somewhere between here and here. My concern is that can you speak to 2 months ago?
He's a veteran advisor with the country's caving rescue organization called Spilio Secours Français. More importantly, it's where he grew up and began caving as a boy.
Here's what we know. There's been a ton of rain. We have 7 cavers trapped underground, and they've got enough food to last them 3 days. We have to try and rescue them. But we know the only entrance is filled with water.
Nicolas Violande and his fellow cavers have now been trapped for almost 24 hours. So far, the air pressure has held steady. But they're in for the shock of their lives. Upstream in another part of the cave system, some debris breaks loose. As the blockage clears, there's a sudden, dangerous drop in air pressure, then a powerful surge of water.
The moment the water goes down, it goes down fast. Faster than it rose.
On a la cage thoracique qui est prise.
Our torsos were shaking and trembling. Our ears were blocked. You really had the impression you were squished into a bottle and being shaken in every direction.
As the water level drops, the men clamber onto a ledge that had been submerged until now.
We were worried. It was like a whirlpool that was going to suck us down underwater, bash us into the walls, and drown us in the current.
The sudden draining of the water disrupts the pressure in the gallery and creates a bizarre phenomenon. For a period of nearly 10 minutes, multiple waves batter the inside of the cavern.
The noise was absolutely infernal. We were really in the middle of the elements that were in a fury.
The unpredictable underground river presents a huge challenge for the rescuers. In order to conquer it, they desperately need the expertise of world caving specialist Bernard Tourt.
The cave system actually descends, and the river flows through it. So essentially, the current flows downward from the highest point to the lowest point.
He heads for Gramont with a special kayak ideal for this kind of rescue. The water has receded. The trapped cavers make camp on a 3-meter wide ledge. The waves have left them badly shaken.
We had to organize. We had to do something. We said to ourselves, survival starts right now. We had about 3 days of waiting. We figured it would take about 3 days for the water level to drop before we could head back out.
The men carefully ration the food that's left. Packets of soup, a few cereal bars, rice cakes, and some caramels.
We started to tabulate what we had for supplies, what we had for light, how much water we had. We had a stalactite that ran with water, drip by drip, that we collected and purified with hydroclonazone tablets.
Bernard Tourt arrives at Viterel. By now, the floodwaters have receded. This means that Tourt can attempt to enter the cave system along with Guy Bariviera, the local expert.
Une fois que je suis arrivé sur place,
As soon as I arrived on site, I was updated on the situation, and we quickly made the decision to form a team that would include Guy Bariviera and myself.
qui serait constitué de Guy Bariviera et moi-même.
Rescuing the trapped men is the biggest challenge of Bernard's career. He and Guy will have to navigate a maze of dangerous caves and unexplored galleries to find the cavers. The rescuers know that the trapped cavers planned to go to some of the highest points of the system. If they made it that far, they might still be alive.
Donc l'eau est bien montée de 30 mètres.
Even though the water rose 30 meters at the lower end of the cave system, it didn't mean that it completely flooded the upper end. So, if the trapped cavers were up there when the water was rising, we had every hope of finding them in perfect health.
En parfaite santé.
Bernard and Guy prepare for their underground search with military precision, gearing up with the most sophisticated rescue equipment. This includes Bernard's special two-man inflatable kayak. Guy, who's already been underground on a scouting mission, tells Bernard that the current is very dangerous.
The objective of the mission was go to the furthest point possible in the cave system. We figured once the water started rising, the cavers would have moved camp, would have withdrawn to a higher part of the cavern.
So Bernard and I left on his customized raft with a lot of equipment to fight the current and to do a lot of climbing.
When Bernard and Guy descend into the cave system, they discover that the underground river is still raging in some passages. In others, it's flooded right to the ceiling. Making any headway among the jagged rocks is taxing and dangerous.
We had enough room between the roof and the surface of the water to move forward, but it was difficult because the water had a violently strong current.
After nearly 5 hours of slogging through the cave system, they're finally within striking distance of the cave called Salle du Cône. This is where Bernard and Guy hope the men are trapped, in the higher galleries. The only way to get to those galleries is to climb.
Imagine the Salle du Cône is a chamber that is pointed. So we arrived at a gallery that is situated at this level, and then we had to climb the slope towards the summit of the chamber. It was about a 15-meter climb to get up to the upper gallery.
It's a grueling 5-hour climb. The two men drag themselves forward, hauling heavy equipment and Bernard's inflatable kayak. When they finally reach the upper gallery, it's waterlogged, but otherwise empty, except for one disturbing sign that someone or something has passed through here.
Once we made it to the upper gallery of Salle du Cône, it's basically the highest point in the area. We looked around and noticed there were little bits of plastic stuck to the ceiling. That was incredibly disappointing and distressing, because this meant the whole network had been filled with water. It was pretty tragic.
Guy and Bernard know that if the men were here, they would have drowned. If they're still alive, they have to be somewhere even higher in the cave system. The next big cave is Clé de Voûte, another 2 kilometers upstream. Bernard and Guy want to press ahead, but it's too dangerous. The water completely fills the low sections in front of them. They're forced to turn around and head back to rescue headquarters to devise a new plan. Nicolas and the other cavers can only wait. With no sense of time and no daylight, sleep comes in fits and bursts. Some sleep, others talk, and always they worry about the changing water level.
So basically, we went into survival mode. We figured it would be a good idea to eat every 12 hours. And we try to really conserve our energy. We had a stove to heat the water so that we could hydrate ourselves as well as warm ourselves. And we still had a bit of fuel for our lamps to eventually light the way out.
They fantasize about the perfect meal.
Almost immediately, the first thing that comes to mind is hunger.
They share and savor memories of great restaurant meals and favorite recipes.
All you think about is food. Eat, eat, eat. And so we had to be really careful and ration our meals. I remember we had one meal that consisted of a spoonful of curried rice, 15 milliliters of hot tea, a quarter of mandarin orange, and a rotten chestnut. That was a meal.
When Bernard and Guy resurface, the rescuers adopt a new strategy to speed up the search for the missing cavers. They tell their fellow rescuers that it's difficult and risky to make headway underground. They'll have to find a quicker way to get access to key caverns. It's time to bring in the heavy machinery. The topographers will try to pinpoint the location of caves that rescuers haven't been able to reach via the underground route. The drilling teams will punch through the earth to get direct access to the chambers below. Drilling should create new entry and exit points along the cave system. This will provide shortcuts for the rescuers and hopefully bring them within reach of the trapped cavers more safely and more quickly. Deciding exactly where to drill is a daunting task. Just 30 centimeters in the wrong direction can mean missing the entire cave system.
We needed 2 types of machines for the drilling operation. We needed drills that could go very deep to try to locate the river, and we also needed drills that could bore out a hole large enough in diameter for a person to fit through. That was essential.
Once started, the drilling teams hammer away at the rock day and night. At the same time, other rescuers try the underground route via the well, which is the cave's only natural entrance. They must work their way up the river to where they think the men could be trapped. The 7 trapped cavers have managed to hold on for almost a week.
What if it snowed in the valley?
But their situation is getting desperate.
It's totally impossible.
They're almost out of food. What's worse,
I just wish they knew. Can you imagine what your mother...
the water is rising again.
With news of the rising water, the fear flooded right back in. We checked the level quickly and saw the water kept on rising, and the current was getting stronger and stronger. And then the biggest fear for all of us was, we all looked up at the ceiling. Everyone said, no way. There's no way we're going in the rafts again. It was so horrible, so difficult physically, that we wouldn't survive a second flood.
Rescuers work around the clock to find the 7 missing cavers. Then the weather takes another disastrous turn. For the second time in a week, torrential rain hammers southern France. Water floods the cave entrance, shutting off all access. A team of rescuers is underground. Now they too are cut off by the rising water. Above ground, Bernard Tourt has to find a way to warn them, and fast. He scribbles a message on a notepad, attaches it to a bare lamp bulb and a phone, then sends it all down a small drill hole. He must draw the attention of his men to warn them of the dangerous new flooding.
So there was the phone, there was the lamp, and there was the message. And the objective of that was to stop them from going any further. We didn't want them to keep going back toward the entrance to Vitarelle because we knew the water had risen there and they would have been trapped.
At first, Bernard gets no response from the team underground. He waits for 3 hours, then a welcome sign of life from the rescuers below. Bernard warns them to stay where they are until the floodwaters recede.
Okay. Got it.
There's nothing these trapped rescuers can do until the water level drops again. Or the drilling crew enlarges the hole so a body can squeeze through. But they are safe.
Okay, and adjust your stuff.
Elsewhere in the cave system, Nicolas Violand and his 6 trapped colleagues have used up almost all the fuel for their headlamps. Even if the water level drops, they no longer have enough light or even the strength to walk out of the cave system on their own. Depression sets in.
We were really wishing the water wouldn't rise to that level again. For me, if that was the case, I would have probably let myself sink. It was a point at which we all wanted to abandon it, to let it all go.
On avait envie de tout abandonner, de tout lâcher.
Drilling teams work around the clock in the race to blast into the rock and enlarge the existing hole. Finally, the giant drill busts through.
Donc ça, c'était vraiment capital pour nous, ce forage. Donc c'est clair que une fois...
That was a major accomplishment for us. Once we created the new opening, it was like removing a whole piece of the cave network.
Tout un morceau du réseau.
But the rescue mission is far from over. even though they've created a shortcut into the cave network. They're still not certain where the 7 missing men might be, or even if they are still alive. Time underground takes its toll on Nicolas and his fellow cavers. Their main preoccupation now is to fight off dehydration and hypothermia. And now there's another worry. Their supply of water purification tablets has almost run out.
J'étais pas fâché contre quelqu'un ou contre...
I wasn't mad at anyone. I was depressed. I felt abandoned. Abandoned by life completely.
Par la vie, quoi, tout simplement.
By now, the massive rescue effort is an international story. The media has descended on the quiet countryside. Bernard Tourt and his team now have to deal with a new set of challenges, especially how to prevent any bad news from leaking out.
There were about 200 to 300 people who came from everywhere. And we had huge problems trying to control that. We heard that some reporters had plugged themselves into our telephone system. We had microphones planted in different command posts. We had people listening to our conversations on long-range microphones.
On avait des gens qui écoutaient avec des micros à longue distance les conversations qu'on pouvait avoir d'un côté ou de l'autre.
Bernard gathers his team and briefs them on the media storm. From now on, they must use coded messages when calling each other.
Ces codes, c'est bien clair.
The codes were used so that the media didn't understand the meaning of our words. So basically, we had time to organize and tell the families.
The rescuers' code, if they find the survivors alive, is "send us some food." If the cavers are found dead, the code is "send us some carbide." As the drilling teams zero in on the large gallery called Clé de Voûte, the calcified rock slows them down. This kind of rock has a lot of cracks and fissures, which can cause the drill head to bend or break.
With the help of a little camera that we sent down into each hole, we looked to see if there were any galleries. At the same time, we measured the speed of the air current, because if there's a strong air current, that means there's a direct connection with the larger cave network.
The drill has penetrated 28 meters down into the rock. Suddenly, it breaks through to a large cavity of air.
We immediately decided to widen the drilled hole.
Bernard and Guy hope the cavers are trapped here, somewhere in the galleries of Clé de Voûte. But the camera can find no signs of the missing men.
Underground, we always have the impression of hearing noises, bizarre noises, strange noises. Above all, when there's a river and the sound of water.
Whoa.
Nicolas thinks he hears a voice. One of the others is also sure he's heard something.
In the midst of the sounds of water and the sounds of voices that we constantly heard, I believe I heard something a little bit stronger, a little bit louder.
Do you think they're coming?
They wonder if it might be rescuers. But for every moment of hope, there's a moment of despair when they realize it's just an illusion.
Something's holding them up.
Yeah.
On s'est dit,
We said, is it hallucination? Two people at the same time? That would be bizarre. Is there someone who's trying to contact us? Is there a rescue? We looked to our left, looked to our right, but there was no one. There was nothing. All 7 of us thought a lot about our families. We thought they must be dead worried. After waiting several days like this, we all wished they still had hope. That they all thought, as long as we don't find them, they are still alive.
Les rescapés se connaissaient tous, mais les familles se connaissaient pour la majorité d'entre elles.
The survivors knew each other, but the families also knew one another. During the whole rescue, they tried to help us.
Essayer de nous aider, essayer de nous soutenir. Les équipes de foreurs, les équipes, toutes nos équipes de sauveteurs qui travaillaient en surface, travaillaient 24 heures sur 24.
The drilling teams, the rescue teams on the surface, we were all working 24 hours around the clock. It was raining, it was snowing, it was freezing. The support of the families was very important and helpful and kind to the rescuers. They made us coffee, they brought us food. They really tried to lend support to all levels of the rescue effort in the face of a daunting challenge.
Apporter leur soutien à tous les niveaux de la pyramide et certainement pas dans les endroits les plus confortables, dans les endroits où les difficultés étaient les plus rudes.
The rescuers are encouraged by the enlarged drill hole above Clé de Voûte. They know that if the trapped cavers are still alive, this is the most likely place to find them. Guy Riviera prepares to descend into the cave system once again.
Okay, good. All right. Guy est rentré sur cette opération.
Guy went underground about 5 or 6 times, and every time he was down for long, complex, and intense missions. All that, combined with fatigue, puts a rescuer in danger of getting injured.
Pour moi, il était une personne.
For a guy like me, Guy was the most important resource. I had to send him on missions where his presence was indispensable.
Où sa présence allait être indispensable.
There were 2 possible routes, a main climb and a gallery that went off in another direction.
Guy unhooks his line. He will be joined by another rescuer. Guy believes that if he can discover a passageway through to the river, he'll be able to find the trapped men. If they're still alive, they've got to be close.
We went into that gallery with the hope of finding our survivors. We covered 300 meters. It was the first time that anyone disturbed the soil. And we didn't manage to find a direct link to the river. No sound, no sign of air currents.
Guy explores other areas of the cave system with no result and no sign of the river.
Finally, after many climbs and many obstructions, we reached a cavity of a few meters that blocked off yet another gallery. As soon as I got through the rockfall, there was an enormous sound. It was the sound of the river, the rumbling of water in the gallery, the resonance of that water. And also at the same time, there was the current of air that was tickling my nostrils.
The discovery of the underground river is a big breakthrough. Guy believes that the trapped cavers must now be within shouting distance.
We didn't hear them. There was no sign of life. But at least the search could now accelerate.
Let me move one of these.
They push boulders into the cavern below, hoping that the noise will spark a response from the trapped men. But again, there's no answer.
We'd been underground exploring for several hours by now.
Guy reports to the rescuers on the surface.
43, do you read me?
He tells them that although he has found the river and cleared a passageway to it, there is no sign of cavers and he cannot go any further.
We'd finally found a connection to the river at this end of the system, but the cavers weren't here, and so we needed to deploy new teams to look for them.
After more than a week of rescue work and 5 marathon underground missions, Guy is exhausted. He has no choice but to head back to the surface. When he arrives up top, he briefs the others about the shaft that leads to the underground river and where they need to go next. He's set the path, and a fresh team of rescuers can now continue the hunt for the trapped cavers.
A few hundred meters. Reach a giant shaft.
Cyril Arnaud is a member of the next unit going in.
Okay.
Guy's discovery of the shaft leading to the river was huge for us. We now had a new access point where we could quickly put our feet back in the river.
At this point, every minute counts. There has been no word from the trapped cavers for almost 200 hours. There's no evidence that they have survived the floodwaters. Cyril's team plows forward. They see a bend up ahead.
I think it was about 8 or 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. Everyone was in their sleeping bags. And then distinctly I heard a voice. Someone who was talking to someone else. There, I felt my stomach going nuts, and my throat closed.
The 7 cavers have been trapped for 9 days. They are so weak and disoriented that they can't even tell if the sounds they hear are real.
There it is again. Shh. Et là, à ce moment-là,
and at that moment, everyone yelled with all their lungs.
Tous ses poumons. Oh! Et c'est les quelques secondes qui suivent.
Then we waited. All 7 of us. Stressed, tense, shivering on edge. And then we heard...
La réponse.
The answer we were waiting for 10 days.
La sensation qu'on a eue.
When we saw the rescuers arrive later, the sensation was unimaginable.
Inimaginable.
After 9 days trapped 100 meters underground, Nicolas and his friends now know they are going to get out of the cave alive. To celebrate, they present the rescuers with one of the stale pieces of cake they've been saving.
It was contact with another human being. To know that we were not forgotten, not abandoned, and finally that we would get out.
Though the men have been found alive, Cyril decides not to call up with the code.
Any word yet?
He'd rather deliver the news personally to Bernard.
Alors, ça a été fait dans un seul but.
He did that for one reason only, to keep the information as confidential as possible. Because we knew, on the surface, there were a lot of people listening in on our comm systems, and if they decoded our message, it could have caused some serious problems.
L'interprétation de nos données codées aurait éventuellement pu poser des problèmes.
In the middle of the night, on the 10th day, the cavers begin to emerge from the bowels of Vitarelle. Nicolas Violande is the first to be winched to the surface.
pourrais jamais assez remercier.
I could never thank enough all of the people who took part in the rescue. It will forever be etched in my memory, in my eyes. We'll always remember those first images of the rescuers looking at us, seeing us alive at the end of 10 days. 10 days of anxiety. What can I do to thank them? You'd need more than one lifetime for that.
It was an immense joy for me when we finally found them. I was a bit disappointed that I wasn't the one who actually met them underground, but to see them a little later when they came out was fantastic.
This operation was the biggest and longest rescue effort ever in France. Obviously, the high point of it is that we found the 7 men alive. For me, it will always be one of those experiences that is totally extraordinary.
After the rescue, Nicolas became an SSF rescuer himself, as did several other cavers.
An experience like the one we went through, it certainly leaves a mark on your life. At the time, I was 19 years old. I didn't know much about life. It taught me a lot. It taught me personally to live more intensely, to pay attention to my choices, and to pay attention to my friends, to respect life. To build ties with everyone, because it could happen to anybody.
Speleology is the last activity in the world that allows us to uncover territories completely untouched by civilization. It's fabulous. All the mountains have already been climbed by one route or another, but underground there's still much to discover. Today we still find new networks of 30, 40, even 50 kilometers.
Vitarelle is now officially sealed off from the world. The military zone is closed to cavers. No one will explore the cave system anytime soon. That is, unless cavers can find a new way in. To this day, many continue to search for that possible fissure, that possible crack that will lead them back down into the abyss.
If tomorrow we find a new entrance to that network, I will be the first to return.